All right, so here's a subject: love in the family. Now, before you get all happiness and jumping around with unicorns and a huggy, very fluffy, love in a family is parents setting an example, right? Mom and dad loving each other, or if it's a single parent household, which unfortunately happens a lot these days, the kids got to know that they are loved and wanted and cared for. And not that you set them up on a pedestal and, oh, the very air you breathe is fabulous, my dear. No, no, you got to do discipline, but that even shows love. You got to be cared for. You got to know that somebody cares about you. And let's talk about love in a family, love of not being loved as a child. What can that do to you? Dr. John Braccio, Regional Psychological Services. Every Tuesday, we get a little free help from the doc right about now. And what's up, Doc? Hey, good morning, Doc Braccio. How are you?
Well, very good, my friend. And life can be a challenge for a person who comes from a loving home. Unfortunately, for persons who come from non-loving homes, the probabilities of them suffering many characteristics that negatively impact their ability to have happy lives is greatly enhanced. Now, I'm not saying, Mike, that all persons who grew up in non-loving homes will be miserable and unhappy and cannot be, highly successful. To the contrary, there are certainly many examples of persons who have come from difficult, non-loving homes and have been successful. Now, with that said, not being loved in a home is not only difficult in our youth, but these characteristics often do really carry over to their lives as a whole and do make their lives difficult and even miserable and self-destructive. The following are some characteristics that too often occur for adults who were not loved as children. Main one, of course, is low self-esteem. The negative words they heard day after day when growing up, unfortunately, can continue throughout their lives. The internal critic too often rules, and that's really sad because a lot of depression can come from that. And then being a pleaser to the point the person has no boundaries on what is good for them, and they simply will do whatever it takes to make another person approve of what they're doing. Another outcome is isolation from others because of really the belief that that's what they deserve. They don't really deserve to be with other persons. And a desire to control others they encounter. This is another bad thing that can occur because they never had control of their lives when growing up. So when you try to control others, this can be self-defeating because it can negatively impact relationships. In fact, and really even end them, which is really a very bad situation. Addiction and inappropriate use of alcohol and drugs in an attempt to stop the emotional pain, which is obviously self-destructive and has no really happy ending. Then there can be overcompensation in a job or career that may look successful to the rest of the world, but is only being done to seek approval for their achievements. It's a hollow success. It's not being done for their own self-satisfaction, but is being done in the hope that they're going to receive approval from others. And then a key one is abandonment. Abandonment, Mike, fears in any relationship that's not going well with the belief that comes in that no one will stay with them because of their conviction the person will, like their parents did, emotionally leave them. Sadly, this occurs because the other person tires of someone who is always fearful they're leaving and often can be quite drama-producing in constant tests to show they will not abandon them. And then a constant fear of failure because they were never given approval for successes, always told they would fail when growing up and believe it will eventually always occur. And then another is the inability to share feelings out of the fear they're just going to be rejected. This, of course, hurts in relationships where there's a need to share feelings and attitudes and dreams. If you can't do that, that could be very difficult. So, again, as I preface this, not everyone has all these characteristics, nor does someone necessarily have all of them anyway. But the main thing is if you grow up in a non-happy, non-loving home, the probabilities are that you're going to have issues, and it's really important that you work work on them and try to overcome them, because it's pretty difficult to be a person who's always worried about what people are thinking about them, fears rejection, and just generally not leading a very happy life, and sometimes goes to drugs and other really inappropriate ways to resolve it.
Now,
it can be very, very difficult.
Doc, as a parent who, let's just say, doesn't maybe you grew up in a home without loving parents, okay, or maybe you were an orphan or whatever, and then you become a parent, you got nothing to model that on. There's a danger there of the whole thing perpetuating itself in a cycle. That's got to be a tough one to overcome. Do you deal with that ever?
Yes, all the time. Often children, even now, just as an example, or adults now, will talk about their parents had a lot of these characteristics because they never learned love when they were growing up. So it can carry from generation to generation. So, yes, it occurs all the time. And a lot of times it isn't that parents were trying to be non-loving, okay? But we're talking here about people that clearly were not. Always the fault finders, you're never doing things right, just emotionally distant. And this can have a real negative impact. It does. I mean, on millions of persons. And we know them ourselves. We can talk to people that tell us how difficult it was when they grew up. They never were given credit. They were always told they were doing wrong. They'd never be successful. Didn't matter what they did. They could never cut the grass right. They could never get a good enough grade. There was always the flaw. There was always things that were there. And people carry this. They carry these in their mind, and they start to hear these negative thoughts, and they don't go away. And they're often isolated. They'll take up drinking. They'll take up inappropriate drugs, and it can just inappropriate relationships. And this can certainly lead to a lot of depression. So it's really important the person find ways that they can get out of these attitudes and feelings. Very difficult to do. The first thing a person has to do is realize that this kind of stinking thinking is destructive, and there's really a need to take control of their lives, move forward and try to find some sunshine and be more positive. But if you get these ingrained thoughts in your mind, like, oh my, they're really very, very hard to overcome. I see it over the years a lot, not just in my work, but also with people. Because when you run into someone who's always seeking your approval, always wondering if you're going to leave them, or always thinking all these negative things, those are people that often came from homes where that was kind of the environment that was there. You're lucky we're here. We really ought to kick you out. You just always do things wrong, and you're not very smart. You're not very good looking. Golly, you're just kind of a burden and a pain for us, and not for our parents that are out there that ought not to be parents. And they may feed and clothe, educate, but they don't have feelings, and they have feelings, but they're negative feelings, and they carry those onto their children.
And on the opposite end of that, as we wrap up, I think sometimes and many times I think today, parents don't understand what being a loving parent is. They make you into a princess, or this is everything you do. Like I always say, the very air you breathe is so fantastic, my love. Oh, we can overcompensate that too. We're up on time. Again, I'm so fast on this. Doc Braccio, Regional Psychological Services. Get a hold of them, and if you, first of all, you gotta find out if you fall into any of that, and that you can deal with it. You can deal with it. There's ways to do it. Doc, we're up. Appreciate it though. Next week we travel and check into a whole nother subject. All right.
Listen, always good to talk to you, and there's always hope as long as we're willing to make changes and try to be more effective in life. All of us, all the time, particularly when you grow up in difficult homes. Talk to you later, my friend.
All right, take care. Dr. John Braccio, Dr. John B. on the web, 1320 WILS. Back in a minute.